Lightning like Steve McQueen. I'm in the fast lane when the light turns green. And I built tough, I ain't nothing but grit. Cause I made rugged blood, sweat, and spit. Yeah, like a horse I fly. Better push yourself in for a bumpy ride. I like to play hard, but I work harder. And I weather the storm cause I'm built stronger.
What is up, ladies and gentlemen? We are back. We are live. It is the Freight Coach Morning Show, the top morning show in transportation, coming to you guys every single weekday, 8:30 a.m. Pacific, 10:30 Central, to break down some industry headlines and, most importantly, provide some actual insight into what you can do with all of this information. Rest assured, ladies and gentlemen, if this is your first time tuning in, welcome. This is the real side of freight. There is no theory on any of my content, whether it's this show or my twice-a-week long-form podcast. I only talk to transportation professionals to bring you information that you can apply, utilize, and see a meaningful difference in your business and your life. Normally, I'm in my studio, but there was an internet outage this morning, and I don't believe in taking a play off because when you're in business for yourself, you got to find a solution. And my solution is just fucking go home and stream from my kitchen. And that's exactly what I'm doing. I'm sitting in my dining room right now, and we're going to do this, and we're going to talk about our topic today of hostage load situations. But before we do that, before I bring on my special guest, I got to give a shout out to my friends over at VHub. You guys, vhubapp.com. Whether you're a broker, carrier, or a shipper, we all need access to trailers at some point in time. And especially in today's market, how do you separate yourself from your competition? Having access to trailers is always going to be that separation. And the best part, you get paid to move these trailers. That's right, you guys. That's on top of the revenue that you can get by loading these trailers out. So they have 150 trailers down in Paragould, Arkansas, needing to get up to Mississauga, Ontario, and you get 800 Canadian to do that. They also have Stoughton, Wisconsin to Milton, Ontario. They have 200 trailers there, and you get 600 Canadian to do that. So you can get in there and create a drop trailer pool at your customers' facilities. And then they have Milton, Ontario to Moncton, New Brunswick for 400 Canadian. And then finally, they have West Valley City, Utah to Calgary, Alberta, and you get $1,550 US to move that. So hit them up, you guys, vhubapp.com. My man Xavier Campos and my friend Stacy Steen, they'll be in the audience. Hit them up. Just do me a favor. Let them know that the Freight Coach sent you. Tracy O. St. Clair, good morning. Thanks for tuning in. And all right, man, I'm going to bring my guest on today. You guys, we're talking about hostage loads. What do you do in all this situation? So I got my friend Jason Zalewski here today. So Jason, thank you for joining me.
Good morning. Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Dude, anytime, man. And, you know, like Jason's my compliance go-to with everything because, like, you've been in the industry now for 22 years. You've worked in operations, compliance, safety, all of that stuff, man. And, you know, so what, like, a little bit of a background, man. Introduce yourself to the people who are watching and who are going to be listening to this show later.
Yeah, so Jason Zalewski, you know, a heavy background in operations, safety, compliance, as Chris has mentioned here. You know, currently in the market. So, you know, if you see what you like, certainly hit me up on LinkedIn. If you have any opportunities, I'd like to take a look. But yeah, you know, just a big career of everything kind of revolving around the trucking industry, from A to B. And, it's been a wild ride. I've learned a ton and I'm still learning things, you know, to this date, but Chris had asked me, you know, hey, why don't you come on and talk about something that's near and dear to you? And
yeah,
why not hostage loads? Because it's a fun topic and a lot of people deal with it.
Well, and that's exactly it, Jason, because it's like, I think I've dealt with it a few times. You know, I've dealt with hostage loads. I've seen some people out there that are very good at breaking the law. Like, they're actually professional criminals, and they're not the petty, hey, just give me $200, you know, Venmo right, or something like that. Like, I've dealt with some where they had like a certain document that they needed to be signed of a non-disparaging style thing. And on top of that, a fee was to be paid directly to them and everything else. It's very fucking in depth on the levels that some of these people will take it. But one thing that I've also realized in my career is that not all of it, but some, like the majority of it, I think is very avoidable, because I think that a lot of these scenarios, Jason, are very telling early on. And especially right now in today's market, because again, I think, like, you know, if you want to tie double brokering into this mix and everything too, the driver who's actually hauling the load is the one who's getting screwed. And I think the biggest telltale sign is for easy conversation, if everyone else is paying $1,000, but this random person says that they'll pay you $1,800, that's like the biggest red flag out there.
Right. Right. And you nailed it. It's these things develop very quickly, and it's totally avoidable. 99% of the time, totally avoidable. And really what you have to do as a broker to get in the state of mind here is understand where that carrier's coming from or that driver. Did you set up an appointment for 8 a.m. for pickup, and he shows up and it was first come, first serve, and he sat there for 12 or 16 hours, right? Mm-hmm. You do compensation for that, and that's how these conversations start, looking for maybe additional compensation for time. Something that was agreed to maybe didn't happen as it was supposed to, and then they escalate from there. And that's kind of step one in this process is over everything, stay calm, right? So cooler heads will prevail. Do not get into arguments with drivers or dispatchers specifically about rates or compensation that's due. The main focus is to get that load delivered, right? As quickly and as effectively as possible. So one of the things I like to do initially when I hear of a situation like this coming up, it's already to the point of escalation, right?
Yeah.
If someone's saying I'm holding your whole load hostage, you've got to separate now the two parties that have been working together to try to resolve this and get somebody else involved. Get a third party involved, somebody that hasn't heard both sides of the story, right? Whether that's your carrier service or carrier sales manager, your dispatcher's manager, someone else that can listen to their story and the driver or carrier story and make a determination. And again, the majority of the time, they're gonna figure it out really quick that, hey, this guy wasted 10 hours. He had other loads, set up after this, and now he's gonna miss. Let's throw him a bone. Let's take care of it. Let's get our freight delivered, right?
Yeah, because I always look at it like this, Jason, is it's like what you're doing, you're exposing your relationship with your customer to the nth degree. Because if that person legitimately pops the seal or pops open the doors and fucking throws that freight on the side of the freeway or a parking lot, you're in for a big, big problem. And it's all over a couple $100.
Right. That's the next point, Chris, is you've got to look at the big picture here. Is the couple $100 worth the $40, $50, $60, $100,000 claim that may result as a result, of the hostage situation? You've got to look at the big picture. Granted, it sucks to have to swallow your pride, give in to the demands, but ultimately you've got to get that load delivered, right? There's a lot of stuff you can do after the fact that maybe will help you recover some of that loss, but initially the focus has to be get the load delivered or get it secured somewhere to where you can get it, picked back up. But you've got to maintain the integrity of that load.
Yeah, no, I'm right there with you, man. I got to give some shout outs here. Denise Favor, good morning. Thanks for joining. Sunny Sharma, good fucking morning all. Cody Miller, good fucking morning. Freight enthusiast. Stephen M. Peterson, good morning to you, sir. Thanks for joining. Xavier Campos, another day, another opportunity. Let's fucking go. Hashtag the Freight Coach. But yeah, dude, I just because again, when you're in those situations, I think a lot of it on the front end is avoidable. And a lot of it is it's how you're handling it. Like if you failed on a load today and it's got to go to tomorrow and the customer tells you the driver's a work-in, make sure that they're aware that it's a work. And that's one thing. Sorry, I got dogs at the house. I'm sure you can hear them in the background a little bit, guys, but that's just part of it. But yeah, I just think that, again, it's like be brutally transparent in these moments. And I talk about this even on the double brokering thing, Jason. A lot of them are looking for that easy scam. They're looking for that individual who blatantly doesn't give a shit about the freight. And I always say it like this, man, it's really hard to negotiate with somebody who knows what they're talking about, right? Because I don't know about you, Jason, you've been doing this for a lot longer than I have. Have you ever got a bill of lading before that was just blank and it didn't have a pallet count or a piece count or like a weight or a commodity on it? I never did in my career, you know? And it's to me, I think the brokers that are out there who are oh, I don't want the person to know the address or the phone number. Like, dude, then you're sourcing the wrong carrier. Like that's a you problem. That's not the carrier's problem.
Right. Right. And I mean, that's kind of the afterthought of a lot of this, or, maybe some proactive approaches that you can take to avoid the situation altogether is, you've got to vet those carriers. You've got to build relationships with your carrier base, right?
Yeah.
If there's a mutual understanding there of the business, this stuff doesn't come up. It's the carrier that you got Friday afternoon to cover that load you've been working on for 2 days that, you forgot to communicate, or there was an issue with pickup. That's where this starts, right? And it comes back to, like you said, transparency, ultimate transparency and communication. You've got to be honest up front. You've got to tell them the situation, and hopefully there's no bumps in the road on the way. But hey, working in transportation, there's always bumps. We see it every day.
So let's look at it from this perspective, Jason. I want to flip the script. What advice would you give to a driver who is being told from a broker that, hey, we're going to get you $300 detention, deliver the load, and then they go ghost? Like the broker goes ghost. Because, dude, I see this a lot on social media. And this is the stuff that really makes my blood boil. Because I'm like, why are you getting out there and doing it and like putting somebody in that position? So it's like, how would you advise a driver? That's because I guarantee there's going to be a driver who hears this or is listening to this right now is like, yeah, I'm fucking going through that right now.
Right.
What are some action steps?
You've got to get everything documented. Document everything. That's literally step one, right? When something gets screwy, when things escalate, start documenting everything. And as far as a broker that might ghost you, there's bond filing action you can take. There's certainly other recourse. There's social media is such a powerful tool these days. Yeah. Bad reporting on certain brokers is certainly something that no broker wants to see on their profile on any of the various reporting websites or load boards. But really, you've got to document everything. I mean, that's the most important thing on both sides. On both sides of this, documentation is key. That's text messages, that's emails. As far as phone recordings, it's probably something you might want to stay away from. But just make sure you have a clear story, a clear path of what has actually transpired during the situation.
No, I would agree with that, man. And again, I'm just of the mindset with a lot of these things, like, for you to put somebody in that position, because I think like a lot of it, like obviously I'm a broker, I own a brokerage, my experience is in brokerage, but I've had the very fortunate experience of getting to know a lot of drivers over these past couple of years, a lot of shippers over these last couple of years. And any broker that's out there that's doing this, I want you to ask yourself this question, because I've dealt with this in my career. The beauty about listening to a guy like me, guys, I don't know everything. I know a lot of fucking what not to do in this industry because I've tried a lot of the bullshit. How will you handle this conversation? Imagine this. You just landed this customer. This is like your fifth load for them. Detention happens. You request detention from the shipper, and then you get detention approved and you don't pay the carrier, but you tell them you're going to pay them. And then that carrier calls that customer and says, hey, this is what happened on this load. Where's my detention? And then that customer's like, oh, I paid that broker detention on that load. What do you think is going to happen to that relationship? What do you think? Because that relationship's dead. Most shippers are going to hear that one time and they're like, fuck that person.
Right.
I've seen it happen because I've had that phone call before. Yep. And I've lost that customer before.
I've certainly heard stories in the past of brokers that will keep that detention pay as a revenue source for their company and maybe only give a portion or a percentage of that to the actual carrier that hauled the load. And never a good practice. Detention pay should be passed through.
Yeah, I agree with that, man. As accessorials should not be a revenue stream for you as a broker. And, again, like people are going to argue that. And frankly, I don't fucking care. This is my stance and I'm going to stay with my stance. And then let's talk in 5 years and compare P&Ls.
Right.
I'll make that argument right now. Let's talk in 5 years and compare P&Ls if you want to make accessorials or a revenue stream for you.
Yep.
But because again, I think like I'm sure you see this a lot on social media, Jason. I know this is like the questions that I get all the time about like customer acquisition. Like, how do I get customers? How do I do this? Selling's the easy part. Like, and it's out to everybody out there who's struggling to build their book of business. They're like, fuck you. And I agree. I'm going through that process, but like the real work always starts when you're in these situations, because like getting a customer will always be easier than being in a situation where there's a hostage load or a driver that goes MIA or something like that. Cause those are very real things. But ironically, that's where your book of business grows with your customers, is how you handle those scenarios out there. Because anybody can do this job, and these last couple of years have proven that anybody can do this job when it's easy, when there's minimal pushback on price, when people will take it just depends on what the customer is willing to approve. Everyone's making money. But now when we're in these situations where this is where the desperation kicks in, because you're out there as a broker, you're making money still, and you're pushing these rates down to the point where you're almost cornering these drivers into making hasty decisions, because a lot of people tend to forget that those drivers have families to feed too, right? And the way that I see it is long term, I need to make sure, like being a broker, that like this is the balancing act. Your carriers and your customers are of equal importance. You don't have one without the other, and vice versa. And I think that if you're out there and you're doing the right thing, like, hey, if you fucked up, tell the people you've owned that. A
Right.
lot of these situations, like we've alluded to earlier, Jason, are completely avoidable for the most part. Yes, you're going to be in those situations where people are just criminals, and they're going to do it. But I think for the most part is somebody lost out on some future opportunity, another load because of what you're in. And now this is a situation that you're in. I think that it's always going to be cheaper just to pay it and move on with your day. It might be a big hit. It might be $500, but it's always going to be cheaper than getting anything escalated from there, because it's a monetary amount that they lost out on that they're not going to get to. They're not looking to hold that load hostage, because anybody in that situation knows that long enough, there's going to come a time when a broker's like, fuck it, you just bought it. I'm going to call your customer right now and tell them that you just bought that load off of your refusal to deliver it. And I just think that, but you don't need to get there
Right.
at all. You can just pay the couple $100 and move on. But again, to avoid paying the couple $100, how are you doing your job efficiently on the front end? And that's what you need to focus in on in those moments, because that can help you alleviate a lot of these scenarios. But let's say on top of that, like we're in the thick of it right now, Jason. They're like, we're not telling you where the truck is. You're not going to do this unless you pay us X amount of money right now. And say you pay them and then they still don't go and deliver the load. What do you do?
Right. So again, things can get really hairy really fast. And that's kind of the ultimate hostage load, right? Is where you have no idea where the product is. You don't even know if it's in their possession, personally. But you've got to be able to verify where that load is, or if it's been delivered, or when it will deliver, before you issue any kind of payment, because that is your only leverage in the situation, is that you have money to pay, and that is your only leverage. So you cannot get to a point where you've paid somebody without that freight being secured somewhere and verified it's being secured by yourself. You cannot get into that situation. Some other options you might consider: call that carrier's insurance company, let them know the situation, let them know that there's a possible claim for X amount of dollars following the situation. Sometimes that insurance company will reach out to their insured and say, hey, what the heck's going on here? Let's get this thing delivered and figure it out some other way. Right.
Yeah.
But, your options are severely limited as a broker in these situations. You have very little leverage, and the driver or carrier is literally in the driver's seat. Right.
Yeah.
So, the best thing I would try doing is, again, separate the original parties, right? Whoever this came to first, escalated internally to management, right?
Yeah.
Let that manager then try to negotiate whatever the carrier's asking for. If it's $1,000, maybe we can get it down to 800. Maybe we can get it down to, I'll give you half right now and then half when you can prove it's been delivered.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things you can do kind of in that realm that kind of still build a little bit of trust, even though it's shaky, but at least that load will keep moving, it'll get delivered, and then there's your recourse after the fact, after it's been delivered, after that it's been settled. There's a lot of recourse you can take after that point to maybe recoup some of that loss.
Yeah. And I think because there's so many of these situations. I think the best piece of advice that you've given is removing the people with an emotional attachment away from the shipment, and I think again, if you say you don't have that luxury, say you're watching this right now and you're like, I'm a one person operation. We're at the mercy of this situation. And I think that, for me it's you have to understand there is a common ground. There is a solution that can be come to in these moments.
Right. And again, it goes back to that, if you're the only person, you've got to get to that point and get to it rather quickly to swallow your pride, right? Swallow your pride. The situation is out of control. You've got to be able to understand that yourself and then try to move forward as calmly and collectively as possible to mitigate the situation. No one likes to open up their wallet to pay additional money that they didn't anticipate to spend. But I mean, it's part of the game. It's part of the business.
Yeah. Well, hey, man, I appreciate you jumping in here today and talking about this. And we will definitely do this again here soon,
Sure.
Jason. So how can anybody reach out to find out more about and get in contact with you?
Best place would be LinkedIn. Yep.
Perfect, man.
LinkedIn.
Dude, I appreciate it. And that's it for today, you guys. As always, you guys, the Freight Coach Morning Show. We'll be back tomorrow, 8:30 a.m. Pacific, 10:30 Central, to break down some more industry headlines and talk about this. I appreciate you guys. I love you guys, and we'll be talking to you soon. And now